Welcome everyone to the CAL committee this morning. I do have apologies from the chairman, so you have to deal with the deputy chair this morning, and with a number of apologies.
We do, Chair. The Chair has apologised, William Humphrey has apologised, Rosie McCorley has apologised, Karen McKevitt has apologised, and Dominic Bradley has apologised, so we're close to quorum today.
No other apologies to take?
Not that we're aware of.
Right,
that's just the numbers.
Right, members, page 5 on the draft minutes of the meeting of the 19th of March. We all agree that they're a true and accurate record? Great. Thank you. Takes us on to 3, detailed briefing on the cultural awareness strategy.
Chair, this has Clark's memo at page 10, if members want to turn to that in packs, and a copy of the cultural awareness strategy at page 13. At the time of going to print the pack, a briefing paper hadn't been provided, so that is in page 3 of the tabled papers pack. Members should have a copy of tabled papers. Should be on desk, so if members want to refer to page 3 there for the briefing. Members will recall that the committee received a letter from the Grand Orage Lodge of Ireland highlighting that the funding that had been made available under the cultural awareness strategy was coming to an end at the end of this month. Members can see pages 18 and 19 of their pack that the strategy outlines that funding would only be available within that CSR period, i.e. April 2011 to March 2015. So there had always been an understanding that it was a 4-year programme and would end with the original CSR. Obviously that was prior to the additional year of the Assembly. The other thing to highlight, Chair, is that the Minister answered a number of questions on the strategy during CAL questions on Tuesday, and a summary of outcomes from the strategy can be found at page 7 in the briefing paper, which is in tabled papers. Yeah. So, Chair, if you're content, we can bring in the officials.
Right, so are we?
So we, and then you welcome them, and then just get them to start.
Right. Morning. You're very welcome to the CAL committee. Martina Campbell, Tommy McCauley, both very welcome, and take it one of you will lead off. And okay, Martina.
Okay, Chair. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the opportunity to brief the committee on the cultural awareness strategy. Tommy McCauley, my colleague, leads on the day-to-day business with the strategy. You've received a written briefing outlining the key points. I'll cover just a very brief few issues and take questions at the end. So the cultural awareness strategy was launched in July 2012 and is scheduled to end next week. Although we're in the process of assessing the strategy with input from both organisations, GOLI and the GAA, I think it's fair to say that they have successfully delivered on the objectives of the strategy. It's been extremely rewarding and encouraging to see the positive level of cooperation and commitment between both organisations to deliver on the strategy. And I think it would be appropriate to pay tribute to both project workers, Dr. Donald McAnallen and David Scott, for their dedication, their hard work and their commitment to delivering. Both organisations have engaged with schools and community groups from both traditions and with cross-community groups and local councils to deliver the strategy. And as our briefing highlights, cooperation under the strategy is now the norm. And both organisations routinely share the stage and deliver events, thereby demonstrating a high level of commitment. Unfortunately, given the challenging financial climate, the Department has had to take difficult decisions, and it has not been possible to extend funding for the strategy beyond its lifespan. As the Minister said on Tuesday in the Assembly, we would encourage both organisations to build, through their respective education and outreach programmes, on the levels of cooperation, respect, understanding and tolerance which both projects have demonstrated to date. So We will be doing a post-project evaluation, and we'd be happy to come and talk to you about that when we've completed that. But I'm happy to take questions now, Chair, if that's
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. Yeah, I think I would say, as acting here as chair today, I think we, I think everyone agreed that it did work well, the programme worked well, there was good engagement.
Yeah.
And I think the educational part of it seemed to certainly had much success, certainly from the feedback we have had from, the Grand Orange Lodge. Talking to them, they certainly felt that it was very much a two-way partnership.
Absolutely.
And that, there was a lot of success within, the work. And it seemed to develop and...
It developed from a very faltering beginning. They completely smashed their original targets. The original targets were for 4 events in their own community. Tommy, keep me right in this. 8 events in the other community and 1 joint event, and that's what they led off with. But this year, 14-15, because of the number of events that they put on and how popular it proved throughout the schools programme, their targets for this year were 8 events in their own community, 17 in the other, and 1 joint, and they have exceeded that, I think, this year again. Yeah. So absolutely, the programme has been very well received, and the programme the cooperation between the 2 project workers has been very encouraging to watch and see the relationship grow. And I certainly hope that both organisations will learn from that and take the lessons learned from that programme and cascade it throughout their organisation.
Okay, thank you. Cathal, you're first.
Yes, Chair. Thanks, Tommy. I know you're doing a post-project assessment there. What in real terms do you see here as a sort of any legacy issue of this that would continue afterwards, notwithstanding lack of funding?
Well, I think the legacy is, as I've just said there, that the organisations now have a history of working together. They've built up a network of contacts throughout the schools, across community groups, their own community groups, obviously. They would have had that. And I think that's a big part of the legacy moving forward, that they just take the work that they're doing currently and they run with that and continue to build. Obviously, we would like generally, all of the events have taken place with a neutral third party sharing the stage, and we would have liked to have got them to the position where they could have shared the stage in their own right. And I think that I do think that will happen.
That looks likely, do you think?
I think we were moving very much in that direction.
Just remind me just why there was 2 other applicants there, the Deaf Association and Riot.
Yes.
What did they fall down on in terms of scoring? I don't remember that.
Okay. Yeah, one of the criterion for the strategy was the ability to engage with large numbers within their own organisations. Obviously, the Grand Orange Lodge of Ireland and GAA have very large memberships, and we're able to deliver large public events and also have lots of lodges, clubs. So they met the criteria on that, because when we look at the aims of the strategy to promote respect, understanding and tolerance to both traditions, it was vital that whoever was successful in taking forward the strategy was able to do that to large numbers of people. So the British Deaf Association and An Droichead were assessed as not particularly meeting that criteria in the same way as GOLI and the GAA did.
Okay, thanks, sir.
Yes, thank you. Right, David, you're next.
Thanks, Sharon. Thanks for your presentation. I think it's disappointing that it is coming to an end. I think while you're doing sort of post-assessments and everybody here is quite aware of the work, it went further than that. The media attention that it got, and there was quite a few programmes, news programmes throughout Northern Ireland and paper, print and whatnot, focused in on the work of the 3-year programme, and it really got a good message out there. And I'm just wondering, where can it go now? Because both organisations, I'm sure, like everybody else, is sort of strapped with their own day-to-day running costs and what to do normally. Is there any signposting to where this could potentially be carried through to, and rather than just sitting parked and the whole sort of momentum lost on the project?
Yeah, I agree with you that the programme has had a very broad reach and good.
Yeah, it caught journalists' imagination.
Yeah.
It really.
And that's
message
tribute
out
to
there.
the project workers involved, and I can't praise them highly enough. But in terms of the way forward, I think the Minister was very clear on Tuesday that when the project evaluation is completed, she will look at it and look to support the project seeking funding elsewhere. And obviously we have met with the projects ourselves, and we would encourage them to look at EU funding, and because of under obviously Peace 4, and certainly all departments have a statutory duty, as you know, to promote good relations. So I think the programme, the nature of the programme, does sit very well within the whole TBUC strategy.
Yeah, because the next few years, obviously, both organisations are of new facilities coming on, which
Yes,
tells their
that's right.
stories.
That's right.
And whatnot and stuff, and it's just a great opportunity.
It is. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, any other members?
Just one thing, Chair.
Leslie.
The actual timeline for your post-consultation, what's it likely to be?
Well, the projects will have to submit their monitoring information after next week, the 31st of March. So depending on when we get all of that information in, we would hope to turn it around quite quickly. So we're probably talking realistically sometime in May.
Okay, so it's plenty of time then to actually avail of Peace 4 funding coming on stream.
Yes, and certainly we would, we did meet with them and encourage them to do that. And as you probably know, the department is working closely with bodies in trying to secure, draw down more funds. So we will do whatever we can to help facilitate that.
If I could just add to that, that both organisations through the strategy fed in Peace 3 funding through local councils. For example, the second joint event was held through Fermanagh District Council through their Peace 3 funding. Likewise, Goalie have availed of Lisburn and Castlereagh Borough Council's Peace 3 funding for various good relations and outreach projects. So both organisations through this strategy have come into contact with other similar programmes and have built up a good database of contacts and other programmes that they can tap into and build on the legacy of the strategy.
Okay, I think that completes the presentation. I think we all recognise it has been successful, increasing the awareness of both cultures through education and, of course, building relationships, I think, is a big part of it. And
It was, yes.
increasing respect, I think, for all, I think, is important. So, well done to everyone. I think we would pass on our thanks and your gratitude to yourselves and obviously to both organisations and those that led on it. I think they've set a good example to all of us. So
They do. They've set the bar high.
yeah, we've seen so many programmes through Peace 3 money and various funding, and you do wonder at the end, is there much achieved? But certainly this does seem to have
I
met
think
its
they do have a good legacy
objective.
and they have a good story to tell, and certainly we will be doing all we can, and the Minister is very clear on that we will be doing all we can to support them and get funding from elsewhere.
Yeah, thanks very much for
Okay,
the presentation.
thank you.
Okay, Peter, you want to just... Yeah. Just following on from that then, are we happy that we write to the Minister asking if it considers how this strategy may be funded in the future, and perhaps that we look at the TBUG funding through OFM, DFM. Any comments, or we happy? Agreed. Is that agreed?
Okay, agreed. Thank you.
Right, thanks very much.
Okay, Chair, if we move into matters arising, we'll do matters arising, Chair, and correspondence before the other briefing. Chair, if I can refer members through matters arising to the correspondence tracker at page 13 in table papers. So that's in table papers, page 13, detailing outstanding correspondence. And then if I switch members back to the other pack, page 47, there's a response from the Irish Amateur Boxing Association regarding the audit of facilities that they've been undertaking. Members will recall when the IABA was up a few weeks ago to brief, they said they would provide that. So that has been provided in the pack, Chair, and we're just seeking if members are content to notice that at this note that at this stage, and it can be returned to once members have had a chance to digest it, Chair.
Not agreed.
Okay, thank you, Chair. If members have a look at page 51, this is in the main pack from Strategic Leisure regarding the Sports NI Sports Facilities Strategy in conjunction with local councils. Members will recall previous correspondence on this at page 53 in the pack. Sport NI has been liaising with the committee on this issue to keep members in the loop on the strategy that's being developed, identifying potential opportunities for sports facilities across Northern Ireland. The idea behind this is that there's a more coordinated approach between government, the super councils, and also the 34 main governing sports bodies, or sports governing bodies, so that rather than there being duplication of facilities, these are planned and move forward on a more coordinated basis. Sport NI also has some lottery funding for this, so this is really just a way of trying to take that forward in a much more cohesive way. So what they have done, Chair, is they've organised a workshop for the 21st of April at Sport NI's headquarters to hear an update on the strategy. Now that's available for members if they should wish to attend that. I think 21st of April is a Tuesday, so it's a bit awkward with plenary. Chair, might I suggest that perhaps we see if Dr Hull can go on behalf of the committee? Would that be acceptable to members, Chair?
Right.
Okay, if members agree that. Okay. So we'll request that Dr Hull be able to attend that. If any members do find they can attend, if they let the committee office know, Chair, we will then pass their name on to Sport NI for that. But it's really just a chance to catch up on how far the strategy has progressed thus far. Chair,
sorry, Peter, what time is that?
Off the top of my head, I can't recall. It's Maria's just going to tell me now.
Doesn't actually.
Does it say it in the thing? No. We will check that time and we'll put that out in an email to members. I don't think it says it in the correspondence. No. It just refers to the brief. Yeah. We'll actually try and get an agenda for that as well.
There is an agenda.
The agenda, sorry,
There's
the
a
timing's on the agenda, but if we can get a timed agenda.
It'd be in the morning.
I would have thought so.
Because there's a break for lunch.
Aye. So we'll get a definite timed agenda for you. We'll put that through by email, Chair. If I could move to page 55. Members will recall that the committee had a briefing actually at Sport NI's headquarters from DFibs for Kids. Yeah. And it led on to a piece of work led by the committee trying to identify who has defibrillators, how they're being used and so on. So what we've got at page 55, Chair, is a table of responses that we've had. We've had responses from the departments that we wrote to. We've also had responses from the decal arm's length bodies. It's a bit of a mixed picture, to be honest. Some have them, some don't have them. Others are seeking to get them. Members may also recall from the briefing that so far they retail at about £1,200 or so, but the Education Department had done a tender so that schools could get them much more cheaply. Potentially other departments or other bodies may seek to repeat those tenders so that they can be obtained at a cheaper cost. That's something for those organisations to look at. We've also got information there as to whether or not the bodies have trained people in CPR. That was the other thing we were asking for. But if I can draw members' attention then to page 58, members will see the response from the Minister, indicating that the department doesn't have defibrillators on site. However, the Minister has highlighted that a resuscitation strategy for the whole of the civil service is currently being developed that may identify the need for defibrillators in NICS buildings. Members will also recall at the moment there's not a statutory responsibility. It's not like fire extinguishers at this stage. So buildings and organisations and bodies don't have to have one. At the moment, it's still very much an additional thing that they may or may not have access to, or may not want to have. The Minister's also indicated she believes there is a need for wider defibrillator provision in publicly accessible places, such as community centres, and train stations was another one she had mentioned. She also has suggested this could be part of the community resuscitation strategy, for which the Health Minister has responsibility. Now, we've included that for members at page 14 in the tabled pack. That was launched in July of last year and is a strategy that does attempt to widen the use of defibrillators. So in addition to that, in relation to the sports club, Sport and I, and the department have issued funding through PET-PSE principles to allow the IFA and other sporting organisations to purchase defibrillators. The committee agreed to write to the Ulster branch of the GAA, Ulster branch of the IRFU and the IFA regarding the possibility of a pre-match check by the referee to ensure that a defibrillator is present. Their responses can be seen at pages 61 to 67 in the pack. Now, the IFA has suggested this would put an awful lot of responsibility on the referee at the time, and that the duties of the referees in Law 5 of the laws of the game wouldn't necessarily permit that. They've also invested $75,000 through the Minister's PET-PSE programme to supply defibrillators to schools and clubs. Ulster Rugby has also stated, Chair, that the referee pre-match check puts a huge amount of responsibility on the referee. They've agreed the need for defibrillators shouldn't be limited to match days. Clubs should be responsible for suitably qualified personnel present at training as well as matches. They put the onus on the club rather than the referee, which seems to be the universal feeling on this. IRFU policy is that there's one regularly serviced defibrillator and qualified person present at every training session and match. This has been the responsibility of the individual club and school. This opinion is also shared by the Ulster Council of the GAA, Chair, which states that this shouldn't be the responsibility of the referee yet again, but rather the individual clubs. That seems to be the universal view. GAA works to provide defibrillators at their clubs or centrally within communities, so a defibrillator can be located ideally within about 5 minutes. GAA provides training to clubs in the use and checking of defibrillators. That was the other thing that was highlighted. Defibrillators do actually need regular servicing, so that's another issue that has to be considered. Chair, because there is a community resuscitation strategy already out there under the aegis of the Health Department, and we have the strategy in the pack, but Chair, can I suggest the committee may wish to get a briefing on that? Because it does seem to be the wave of going forward, trying to get defibrillators into community spaces, and as the Minister had suggested as well, potentially things like train stations and bus centres and so on. So Chair, if the committee's willing to agree to that, we can seek to get a briefing on that strategy from the Health Department, if members agree.
Not agreed. Any comments?
Chair,
Sorry.
sorry.
I inquired on the back of this about whether it was possible to get defibrillators for MLA offices, and the response came back from finance was that there would be insurance issues. So, given that everybody else is going to have them, if we're going to do this briefing, could we see if we could deal what are the impediments, insurance or anything else? I mean, I did read the response that came back from the sporting bodies that said, well, look, you may be putting a bit too much onus on a referee. Maybe that's what they're worried about, putting too much. But I think we should explore that area because we are part of the community.
They didn't mention public liability or anything like that, no?
Just said insurance issues, but we do public.
We
We do have public liability insurance, you see. And that's just, I just want, anyway, if I could.
Maybe around individuals, as you said, could be same sort of issues the referee. We check on that and see if we can get more information. But if members are generally good, Chair, I think Mr. O'Husson.
No, Chair, no, that's fair enough assessment there, but I think it's still quite disappointing there that a number of the quite a number of the arms bodies have no access, Chair. Is there any indication, even in terms of numbers, even that are available, Peter? Was that asked?
One of the most interesting things that came out of it was, you'll recall when we were down at Sport NI that day, they managed to tell us they were ordering 2. Libraries NI also came back with quite an interesting response of they have 40 on order. Now, that wouldn't cover all 96 libraries, but I don't know whether there's an intention to try and do that. Those who have indicated haven't necessarily indicated numbers. We can do follow-up correspondence on that. It appears because there's no statutory responsibility to have one, that in some cases they've taken the decision that if they've got a person trained in CPR, which is now common practice, that should be sufficient. But as you heard from the briefing, the defibrillator is a whole different level of ability to resuscitate. So we will check back on numbers that are available, and we'll organise the briefing on the resuscitation strategy in the community, and also we'll check on what the insurance issues are. Chair.
Yes, Basil, sorry.
Just briefly on that point, I shared with the committee, but Libraries NI actually responded to me in a detailed question, and I don't think it does it justice in the table, you know, the no and maybe 40. Actually, they've looked at it in a really significant way, and I'll share the correspondence with the clerk and can circulate for other members. But I think it might be a template for if the libraries are going to do it, well, maybe a number of other people do it. They seem to be very proactive and definitely going to do it.
Chair, then if Mr McRae shares that with us, we could look at that then in terms of the wider spaces idea, and that might, as he says, be then a useful template. We'll take all those issues forward, Chair, if members are content.
Yeah, just
Chair.
Surely we could find out
Yes,
what are the insurance implications here within this building here, where we have defibrillators.
Chair, we have at least 3.
Yeah. So who's
probably more.
So what's insurance?
Part of our rationale is function rooms as well. So we'll check up. We'll bring back on all those issues. Maria, do you?
Right. Maybe hasn't had access.
I know you do, yeah. I know you do.
Chair, we'll take those issues when we bring back the information we find out on that. Thank you.
Just one thing, the correspondence tracker, the churches their correspondence is outstanding for a long time.
Chair, we took a while to get contacts in the churches, and the complication with the churches is they're now going out to individual
congregations.
Yeah, see what they have, and that just takes a bit of time. So we work on set return times, and unfortunately they are now on the outstanding tracker, but I think it's really a case of they are really trying to gather the information. We also corresponded with the uniformed organisations, and again they're having the same difficulty in getting in information.
So it's in progress.
Yeah.
Churches as well.
So the onus, when we did the child protection investigation, we found the onus was often on the church as the holder of the hall or whatever to take forward the issue. So they're now corresponding with individual parishes and so on. So that again we follow up, and it's just because of the due date we have it on the track.
We're all agreed on a proposed action. Right,
So Chair, if I can then
creative breakfast.
yeah, members had asked about further details on the Creative Europe breakfast schedule for the 8th of April, and we have information there at page 69. Chair, what I'll also flag up is Shauna McNeely, the European Engagement Officer from the Creative Europe desk. Members will recall the department has funded that within the Arts Council. Shauna's up to brief the committee on the 16th of April, so that's the first meeting we have after the Easter break, when they are up to talk about their savings delivery plan and a couple of other issues. Shauna's going to be accompanying them to talk about how she operates as the Creative Europe desk officer. So just for members to recall that.
Yes, Basil.
Chair, I was the member that raised this issue.
Yeah.
I do think when you read through the documents, it's the way that the English were approaching it. This is English creative, whatever. But surely we should have somebody somewhere that could go along to this meeting and see what they're doing.
Chair, my understanding would be that the person for that would be Shauna. We haven't had confirmation on that, but we will follow that one up.
I just think that, given that it's a key target of ours to draw down money from this, and that England was doing particularly well, we ought to send someone along as any lessons. So I know we've no remit, but if we could encourage somebody to go and have a look at it, I think that would be a useful thing. It would certainly be.
Can you clarify
very
that,
interested.
Peter?
We'll clarify that with the Arts Council and Sean as to whether or not there's an expected attendance.
And if she can't go, can we get there must be some sort of output from it? Can we?
Oh no, absolutely, and I think that would be because she's a regional Creative Europe desk person. She will get all that information as part of their network. It's a whole UK network, and she will be plugged into that. So if she can't attend, then she should get all the information drawn down on that. So we try and get our hands on that as well.
Okay, that's grand, thank you.
Chair, if I then draw members' attention to page 70 in the pack, you'll recall we had Libraries NI and they mentioned a source of potential funding from the Department of Agriculture with the acronym of TRIPSI, Tackling Rural Poverty and Social Exclusion. It's very similar to PET-PSE. There's a framework there. The Agriculture Minister we wrote to, and she has indicated in her letter that subject to a business case from Libraries NI showcasing value for money, an additional 20,000 from TRIPSI could be made available to the Health in Mind project that the libraries have been running. So, Chair, what I'm suggesting is we seek agreement from the committee that we bring this to the attention of Irene Locks, the Chief Executive of Libraries NI, and encourage her then to pursue this, if members are agreeable.
Agreed.
Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you.
If I can move then to page 10 of table papers. During the response from DCAL regarding the inclusion of Ulster Scots Agency and Forest na Gaeilge in the departmental steering group overseeing the DCAL Arts and Culture Strategy, which is currently in development. Ministers indicated that both organisations work with numerous groups involved in bands, performing, storytelling, oral history projects and music, and the views of these bodies will be actively sought in the consultation process. In relation to the Ministerial Arts Advisory Forum, the decision to include the Irish or Ulster Scots cultural organisations remains at the discretion of the members of the group. Chair, you'll recall we wrote before and the Department had responded indicating that the Ulster Scots Agency and Forest na Gaeilge and other cultural bodies will be fully involved in the process.
Okay.
And I discussed this previously with the Chair, and he had indicated he's happy for this to sit at the minute. So if members are content to note that at the minute, and we will continue to check with the organisations what level of involvement they've had.
Okay. All agreed? Right. Oliver.
Very, very quickly, the Libraries NI, we should be writing to Erin Knox as well and telling her that they should be making a submission to the councils on their community plans, because there's money there maybe could be drawn down from councils at a future date, and they should be feeding into that community plan.
Chair, if members are content, then we can add into the correspondence that we can check as well whether or not Libraries NI are already doing that. I suspect Irene's probably on that ball already.
I don't think she is.
We can, she's not. Well, we can check and reinforce that point, Chair. If members are in agreement, we'll add that to the correspondence that's going out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, the next one is Community Festivals Fund Revised Policy Guidance Framework Consultation and a memo from me at page 56 in table papers. Now, I've got to highlight to members that's embargoed until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, so we can't discuss it, and it shouldn't be circulated until it has.
Sorry, what page are we on?
That's page 56 of the tabled pack.
Yeah.
So it's marked restricted. So it's for members to have a look at. It's being launched tomorrow. Chair, what I'm suggesting is we subsequently get a briefing on the consultation responses once those are available. We suspect, I think it's probably going to be sometime around May. Possibly, sorry, June. We will then seek a briefing on that if members are content. But it's embargoed until tomorrow morning, so we can't go into any more detail on that in the meeting at the minute. But if members want to take it away, have a look at it, and then we will get a briefing, Chair, if members are agreeable.
Yeah, all agreed?
Okay, thank you,
Thank
Chair.
you. Okay.
Chair, if I then move to correspondence, at page 102 in tabled papers, We have a report regarding the Scientific Committee for Assessing Salmon Stocks in the DCAL jurisdiction. Now, the letter is highlighting some issues that have been encountered regarding rivers meeting targets in relation to the management of commercial salmon fisheries. Therefore, they're proposing changes to the fisheries regulations. That's now become necessary because of the assessment, limiting the numbers of salmon that are going to be caught in individual rivers. Members will recall we've had legislation, secondary legislation before, come to the committee last year, again reinforcing protection of salmon. Members will also be aware that restrictions on catch have increased over the years to try and sustain stocks and so on. This is really a further review of that and will be an amendment of the regulations. Essentially, the department's flagging up that something further in terms of amending those regulations will be coming to us. This is an early warning, basically. So at this stage, prior to draft regulation change, if members are agreeable to note this for the minute until we get more information.
Any comments? All agreed?
Just the obvious one, Chair, and that is that it's hard to see how, the commercial farming of salmon relates to, if you call them natural salmon, which spawned in the rivers anyway.
I'm not. My expertise on this is not great, but I think it's a different kind of issue.
It's not about commercial farming.
No,
it's
not.
No, this is
just a natural salmon returning to spawning ground.
Commercial catch of salmon, which requires the legislation to be extended, as far as I understand.
Yes, that's
in order to continue the catch and release scheme that is in place.
When we get the process for secondary legislation on this, this is just a flag up of an initial assessment. There will be further documentation that goes into a lot more detail. It sounds as though they're still deciding from the initial scientific assessment how they want to proceed in changing the regulations. We will get further information on that in due course. If members have particular queries or issues, if they want to let us know about those when they've had some time to digest this, we can then take those to the department. But I think we're probably in a position where we will know more quite soon once the regulations are being modified. If members are content to note for the minute, we'll go back to officials, see what the timescale is for that.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Page 75. We have, sorry, no, I'm jumping on there, sorry. The NIO has forwarded us 2 hard copies of conflicts of interest.
75 of what?
Sorry, no, sorry, I've skipped on. This is moving to this. We'll deal with the page 75.
Yeah, we're going back.
Sorry. I have this. You don't have a copy of this. You don't have a copy of this.
Correspondence, we're still on back.
We have 2 hard copies of this. The Audit Office has sent all committees. We got 2. I don't know why everybody else only got 1. It's called Conflicts of Interest NIO Good Practice Guide. When they come out with something like this, they will forward it, and it will be in the library and so on. We have 2 hard copies that members can take. It's also accessible on their website, and we can send you a link. Okay, but it's just to flag up to members it has been released, and all committees will have sight of this. So, as I say, we have 2 hard copies, but we'll also send you the link on it.
Right, and that's...
Okay. That's come from the Audit Office.
They sponsored that report?
This is their report. They have developed this and they have issued it. So we have the 2 hard copies, but we'll also send everybody an electronic link. I'm just wanting to flag that up.
Okay,
sorry then.
The chairperson's business. Yeah, we're moving into that.
That's that. So chairperson's business, Chair. Members are aware. Sorry. Forgive me for 1 second. Members are aware of the recent issues in the media. Thank you, Chair. The recent issues in the media around the withdrawal of funding from the Ulster Bank Belfast Festival at Queens by Queens. This is something we had. The Chair had asked us would we seek a briefing on. There are some issues internally that we can't discuss at this stage. We do have a briefing scheduled for the 30th of April with Tony Gallagher. Tony Gallagher, PVC at Queen's, has been put forward as the representative on this. There are some other issues there that we can't discuss that has delayed a written briefing. We will get a written briefing on this next week. We will issue that to members. I appreciate it's the recess, but there are just some issues here that I can't.
Of a staffing nature?
I can't comment. We can't discuss those, Chair.
Right.
But it's just slowed everything up.
So, let me get this right though, this has been all over the news media.
Yeah.
We didn't know it was coming. This committee is sidelined and irrelevant. We're going to cut the tribe out of the Belfast Festival, and now you're telling us I can't tell you what it is we should. I mean, this is supposed to be an oversight committee. We're not getting engaged in this debate, and by the time it comes to us, it'll be too late.
Chair, these are staffing issues that I can't comment on, but I would also indicate that because this is Queen's funding, they have responded by indicating that this is because of reductions in their budget, which obviously is the responsibility of another department and not DCAL. There are just issues there that, Chair, I'm happy to elaborate on out of open session. I just cannot talk about in open session. I apologise for that.
In closed session, but
I appreciate exactly what you're saying.
So if we're talking about in closed, we'll do it.
To an extent, we are simply at the mercy of what Queen's feel they are able to tell us and put on paper at the minute.
So we do that.
Do you agree then we defer it till later on at the end of the meeting?
We're planning a closed session at the end of the meeting anyway, so
Great.
members are content.
Okay.
And can I ask, as a follow-on, if we're going to be dealing in the closed session, or where we're going to deal with the fact that the Arts Council announced, 6 bodies were not getting any funding?
We can look at that then as well.
I mean, the fact is we don't get any information. You get more from the BBC than...
Chair, we have a budget consultation briefing later on today, and that the closed session is designed to follow on from that so that members can talk about this. We have the Arts Council up to talk about their cuts and the rationale behind them on the 16th of April, which is our next committee meeting. We had scheduled in all of the arm's length bodies. They have made these announcements last weekend. They will be able to discuss the rationale for those when they come to the committee on the 16th. It's a case of simply scheduling them in, and we have done that, and they are at the next meeting, and they will be able to talk fully about that.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Right, thank you. Next item, Cinemagic.
Then the Cinemagic
Invite.
at page 75 it's in both packs, but if I turn to page 75 of the tabled pack, because it has more details on it of what the page 75 of the tabled pack, or sorry, not the tabled pack, sorry, the main pack, sorry. Page 75 of the main pack, there's an invitation from Cinemagic to a screening of A Christmas Star to mark the end of Creativity Month.
Easter?
Well, now, members will recall Christmas Star was partly filmed within the building here. They filmed in the Senate chamber, and this is the first sort of screening of this. It's like the kind of big show screening of it, and they're doing it in the Odyssey at 5:30 next Tuesday. If members are interested or able to attend, if they let us know, and we let Cinemagic know about that. So that's something for members to have to think about. It's 5:30 next Tuesday, the 31st of March. So if members can attend, just let us know.
Just while you're on that, that's an invite to an event to celebrate the close of Creativity Month. Do you actually know, I mean, we went to Creativity Month up to the Northwest, but what actually happened at Creativity Month?
Chair, Creativity Month is March of every year when organisations across the creative industries will organise programmes. A number of the DCAL arm's length bodies did, libraries did, the Arts Council did. It's essentially a month where creativity can be marked, and there's lots of events across Northern Ireland in lots of creative industry sectors.
Could we ask, just, is there a post-event analysis on this, and how much money was spent on it by the department? This is a department-sponsored event, isn't it?
Chair, it's more. There are lots of organisations doing this. It's not necessarily DCAL exclusively. Each organisation across the sector will take its own view on what it wants to do or what it's going to do. So, Libraries NI had a programme that wasn't necessarily receiving any additional funding from the department. So it's not something that there's a set budget for this from DCAL and then it happens. It really is a lot of organisations in the sectors, in the creative industries, will develop their own programme. So it's not...
Would it be appropriate to ask for the department's assessment of Creativity Month and inquire if it provided any funds to support it. If we could just write and ask them that.
Chair, if members are content, we can do that. That's fine, yeah.
There were a number of public events. And we were asked some of them. I personally.
There were events that, again, different organisations, like the City Council also has a
W5,
programme, and so on. The W5 runs programmes, but they're not all necessarily getting money drawn down from a.
So it's not even the money necessarily. I'm just inquiring if there is money. The real issue is Creativity Month. I have to say that the chair was indicating so largely passed me by.
Nothing creative happened.
We were up here, that's why.
Well, could we just ask and find out what is their assessment of Creativity Month, and if there was any funds, no problem, but just what it was. But it doesn't matter whether there was or not.
Okay, Chair, we'll go ahead and we do correspondence.
Right, thank you. Forward work programme.
Forward work programme is at page 77, Chair. I've nothing unusual or particularly to flag up in that it's setting out the briefings we've got coming up on savings delivery plans and so on, and we'll talk about the meeting on the 16th after AOB. So it's really just there for members to note at this stage.
Thank you.
Further briefings to schedule in, and we've confirmations to come back, but essentially most of the upcoming briefings we've indicated are arm's length bodies coming with their savings delivery plans.
Where is the meeting that we're expecting from stadiums? Do you remember the
Casement update?
Yes.
That is being scheduled in, Maria.
We are waiting for the report coming from DOE and just the other report that the department are waiting on. It's due in April. So once we get that,
there was correspondence from the department a couple of weeks ago on this, and they said essentially they will update us when they have the information from DOE around costs and so on.
they're hopeful for the report in April, and then once that, the minister said she's happy.
As soon as we have
as soon
that,
as they have it, it'll be
update.
shared and we can have a briefing.
It's just that it's important, and I would like to, as soon as possible, to have it on the forward plan.
As members will recall, that the issue around this was not a decal defended court case, it was a DOE case, so until they get the information from DOE, they really can't tell us anything. And then there's the issue then of planning being resubmitted and so on. So when they have that information, they have assured us they will update us straight away.
You realised you said there was DOE, but the funding for the stadium was a decal issue.
But Chair, what I'm saying is the information around the court case, which was what the committee had specifically asked about, is DOE, and DOE's writing a report, and that's going to come back to decal, and they will then talk to us about that. The issues around the planning are what's holding up everything else, and that again will be part of the update.
Okay. Right, thank you.
So,
Takes us on to any other business?
Chair, any other business? Yes. Chair, Mr. Crate highlighted an issue around reservoirs, redundant reservoirs, at last week's meeting when we had briefing from the department on a couple of angling issues. We had the fisheries bill, obviously, and then we were getting an update on the angling review. The officials had mentioned 14 redundant reservoirs that were passing, that NI Water had, and were looking to dispose of. Now, part of that was they were really looking for social project plans coming from either departments or councils or other public bodies, if those could be suggested. There was also an indication of perhaps they would be, potentially if that wasn't forthcoming, they might be commercially sold. What we were really looking at was to maybe seek further information on just exactly what the status of that is. Some members may recall that as part of the ADSI plan that members were briefed on, the Ards and Downs Salmon Enhancement Association's plan for Strangford Lough and Lough Cowie, just north of Portaferry. We'd gone to visit Lough Cowie and we met decal officials, water officials and DRD officials there.
Some time ago?
It was March, April last year. At that stage, the disposal, I think, was about to start, and we had some detail on it. Chair, what I'm really suggesting is that we correspond probably with decal, but it may well be more of an issue for NI Water to correspond. But we'll initially, Chair, correspond with decal so that they're aware of the committee's interest on this. around what exactly the status is of these 14 reservoirs, who is currently in possession of them, and if they are able to indicate to us just at what stage or what their status is in terms of disposal. If members are agreeable to that, Chair, we'll enter into correspondence on it.
Cathal, you want to come in?
Chair, yeah. Chair, something that I've been quite closely involved in with the Lochcoy and the Athley project, and in fact I'm actually meeting them there today. But the status of that is subject further to an AQ question that I put in recently, is that certainly in the case of Lochcoy, it will be going on the open market in the 15-16 financial year. So I think that we do need to clarify that, because that is a social enterprise project that has quite a bit of merit, I think, and I think that we should be giving it every back-end support that we can. So yeah, I think it is important that it is clarified that these resources, which are currently in the remit of NI Water, are not just put onto the open market and disposed of willy-nilly here and there without any sort of plan for them.
Leslie, you're next.
Yeah, it's just Mr. Devitt did say to me in response to a direct question that they had agreement with Northern Ireland Water they were going to be transferred to DECAL. That came as a bit of surprise to me, because I know that councils who in fact are responsible for providing these, pre-1973, we're interested, in fact, were their assets, and would be interested in taking them back in maybe for a wider remit than DECAL. But I don't think councils are aware. It sounded as if, the doors are already closed. So I think we do need clarification as a matter of urgency, Chair, so we know exactly what's going on.
Chair, if members are in agreement, then we'll correspond on that.
You're under the impression that they are being transferred to DECAL?
He was quite clear. That's why, unfortunately, we didn't answer that. But I worded the question directly, and he says, yes, Northern Ireland Water have agreed terms whether for transfer.
That goes against the response I had to my AQ, which said it was going on the open market, including Clyde.
So we need to clarify. I say that we'll have a voice record of it, obviously. I don't know whether we can check that.
I think that may have just been confusion at the time.
It might just be nice to just ask them the question anyway.
We'll clarify, Chair. We'll seek clarification.
A number of them.
Because as Basil says, quite often it's a fait accompli, and we hear about it after it's all happened.
Yeah, I understand a number of them have been on the market and been put up on the market.
Chair, that was the understanding we had originally, that they were.
Some of them.
And my recollection goes back a year, but I think that there was talk of May last year they were going to be advertised effectively, and I don't know if there's been disposal since, but this at least will allow us to find out what exactly the status is.
Okay.
Chair, I have been informed by Northern Ireland Water themselves and requested particularly on a Port of Vaux, a lot of controversy about it. They said that the council would be off first.
Okay. That was what when we had the officials at Lochcoy, they seemed to suggest that would be the preference.
I think what did happen was that they were there was a request for expressions of interest went out, and perhaps in most cases none was received back, and then the consideration about whether or not it goes on the open market.
Chair, could have fallen, that's a good point, between two stools because of the two councils now, and just about change over and who was dealing with what and all the rest of it.
Chair, is there an awareness of whether that was an advertised expression of interest or whether there was direct contact with the council? We're just not sure on that. Okay, well, we'll check back on that and bring that back to committee, Chair.
Great, then, thank you.
Chair, because we're going to go into closed session after the briefing on the budget, we're just going to do date and time of next meeting now.
Sorry, any other business?
Sorry, any other item?
Any other business?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Chair, I'm aware that there's a report to be published, I think it's within the next month or so, regarding a genetics survey that was done on Lough Neagh-Dullahan, and partially funded by DECAL under Professor Prodel in QEB. I'm wondering, could we get access to that if possible? I know there is a launch, I think, in Antrim towards the end of next month, so I presume it's going to be published before that. So,
Chair,
just have a personal interest in that, by the way.
Chair, members will recall we visited the eel fishery at Toom now.
June 2 years.
July 2013. Yeah. My goodness. 2013?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
July 2013. And we did get a presentation at that stage on the genetics project on the Dullahan, and the committee did actually write to seek an extension of the scientists' funding. So there is a committee interest definitely in that. So if we follow up on that, Chair, with the department, that would be, I think, quite an interesting sort of outcome to that.
So
Chair,
other items?
Chair's there.
Other items? Any other business? No.
Okay.
Move on
So,
then to...
Chair, just if we do date and time of next meeting will be after Easter recess on Thursday the 16th of April at 10 a.m. in the usual room. No surprises there.
With ACNI and NI Screen
We
coming.
have, yeah, Arts Council and NI Screen are coming to brief on savings delivery plans. Also, we'll have, as part of the Arts Council, Shauna McNeely's coming. Sorry, Shauna Neely's coming to talk about Creative Europe Desk as well. So, Chair, if we can then move on to second briefing.
Right, yes, we have then the second briefing this morning is BCAL briefing and budget consultation. So if you'd like to bring the officials in, please. David Carson, David Brady.
Chair, can I also
Decal.
highlight to members that there's an additional paper. We have a paper in the pack, but tabled for members is an additional letter and paper that goes into more detail. So that's on members' desks, and officials will make reference to that. So that's now in addition to the papers we already received. So that's on members' desks.
Okay. Welcome, gentlemen, to the DCAL Committee. David Carson, Director of Finance and Corporate Services, and Damien Brady, Equality Officer. So take it, David, you're going to lead off.
Yeah, I have a few opening remarks, Chair, if you're happy to take it.
Yeah, go ahead.
And thanks, first of all, for the opportunity to address the committee on the second consultation exercise on the final budget for next year. I hope you've had an opportunity to read our summary findings and responses to the second consultation, and the committee should now have a more detailed version of this document, which will be placed on the department's website today. What I'd like to do is to begin with a brief outline of what we have done to allow us to produce the final budget and the risks that the department face in order to live within its allocations. And then following this, Damien and I are happy to take questions. The draft budget allocated cuts of 10% to the department compared to our 14-15 opening position. The Minister then secured a further $2 million to meet unfunded pressures, which related to PRONI running costs, the Northern Ireland Screen funding deficit, and to facilitate preparation of a business case for the sub-regional stadia programme. This additional allocation did not affect the level of savings required elsewhere. The Minister also confirmed her initial decision, which was to offer sufficient protection to libraries to prevent any further closures, and this resulted in the cut against libraries being reduced to 7.5%, while cuts elsewhere were increased to 11.2%. Before finalising budget allocations, the Minister had asked that a further second consultation exercise be carried out on the department's savings delivery plans, and focusing in particular on their equality impacts. And this second consultation was launched on the 9th of February and closed on the 9th of March. A small number of representations were made, and these have been summarised already for the committee. A fuller account is contained in the document published today, and I'm happy to take the committee through that, if this would be helpful.
Yeah, go ahead, please, yeah.
Do you want me to do that now, Chair?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Okay. Well, the document, after a brief introduction, it starts off and it just summarises really first of all, it lists the number of respondents, or those who responded to the consultation. And then, in relation to each area, has listed the issues raised, has tried to summarise those in bullet point format. And then probably the most informative section is then at section 4, which is the departmental response to those various points that have been raised. And if we just take you through that, in relation to, first of all, the general comments that were made about how the process operated, the level of information that was made available to consultees, the point, I think what we would say is that a lot of this was actually outside the control of the department. We had to undertake this exercise in a very challenging time scale. We tried to publish sufficient information to allow people to get an understanding of what was behind the savings delivery plans. And you'll be aware that we did publish the savings delivery plans themselves. In terms of there was an issue. Some people raised the issue about how the savings allocations had been calculated. We started from a position where we allocated the savings pro rata, really, across the DCAL family. We felt that in order to undertake substantial shifts in allocations would require a lot more planning than was available to us. So that was really our starting point, and then we made some amendments to that, for example, for the libraries issue. There was a point made about the need to attract more EU funding, and I think we would concur with that. We're currently taking measures to try and increase resources in this area, and we'll be seeking in the future to leverage more income for the department from that source. Turning then to the arts sector, there were points made really just generally about the impact of the reductions and the fact that this would lead to job losses, and really just in terms of the third sector, it would create a very negative impact. I think we recognise that, and I think it's unfortunate, but it is a reflection really of the very hard decisions that we have to make right across the range of the department's activities. Particularly in relation to, for instance, the Arts Council, who are primarily there to pass on funding to other bodies, to the third sector, and it's inevitable, I think, really, that where grants are going, or where funding is going to be cut, that those impacts will be reflected then in the grants that they allocate. So it's a very difficult, constrained environment, and that really is reflected in the way it is being played out. There were points made about the Derry, London Derry, the City of Culture legacy, and the need to try and continue to support the work that is being done in the Northwest. And again, I think we'd be sympathetic to that, but unfortunately we didn't have anything in our baseline for that. We have been successful in getting funding through in-year bidding. Certainly that's something we'd be seeking to continue. But unfortunately there's no recurring funding you can set aside for the Northwest. But as I say, we will continue to bid from the centre for that. There were points made about whether the preferential treatment, as it was perceived, that had been given to libraries in Northern Ireland Screen, whether this could be read across into other bodies. And I think the point there is that the Minister had reduced the level of savings required for libraries because of the she was cognizant of the widespread coverage that libraries have and the importance that they represent to local communities. So that influenced that particular decision, and I think it was on the context that we could only really look at this. Our capacity to do this was very, very limited, and wouldn't go beyond that. And then in relation to Northern Ireland Screen, this came out of the first consultation, the work that's being done by Northern Ireland Screen, and in particular in relation to young people and helping to equip them with the skills for a growing industry. It was taken on board, and she made those points to the finance minister and secured some additional funding there. So those were, if you like, very special cases. There were points made in relation on the arts sector for concerns raised about the impact on people with disabilities. And again, this has been something which has been recognised as participation levels generally tend to be lower in the arts for people with disabilities, and the Arts Council has been taking forward work to try and address that. And they require, for example, their funded organisations to demonstrate the practical measures they're taking to try and increase engagement with disabled with people with disabilities. However, in the work that they have done, there was no indication that people with disabilities would be adversely affected, that there would be worse effect on them from the savings measures than for other groups, and so there was no evidence that would be consequence of what was being done. Moving on then to the library sector, are you happy enough, Chair, that I go through it in this way, or?
Yes, yeah, that's fine, yeah.
Chair, if I might just make a point. We were talking about equality, disabilities, and we said arts. What about sports?
Yeah, I've come on to talk about sports. I'm just trying to deal with sector by sector. In the libraries, moving on then to the library sector, just dealing with the order of the document.
What page is that? Or?
That's page 10, just at the foot of page 10, moving into over a page onto page 11.
Yeah, what in the summary
document?
This is the document that was issued today now. I'm assuming that members have access to that.
Yes, they have.
We don't have page numbers on it.
Page numbers have dropped off the bottom.
Oh, dear.
Makes it more interesting.
I'm sorry. Let's see. There's a subheading, the library sector.
Library sector, yeah.
I think concerns were raised in the library sector about book stocks, and that was one of the sources of the savings, the reduction in the book stock budget. And I think this libraries, I think, had to do this reluctantly, and certainly would be seeking to replenish that budget in the future. They brought it down to a level of 150 per capita, and I think that's the minimum level they believe that they need to sustain a relevant book stock. So it will be pitched at a level which will allow some replenishment of the book stock to take place, not as much as they would like, but it should still mean that the book stock does remain. It does get the benefit of new books coming in. And then I think they will also be monitoring the position closely during the year, and if the opportunity arises, they will seek to supplement the budget as they can. There were points made about opening times, and while libraries has been given some protection. It will still have to reduce opening hours in some libraries.
Still, further still?
Well, yes, I believe so. But it's going through a consultation exercise at the moment. So to try to, when it is implementing further reductions, to minimise as far as possible the impacts on library users, and that would include any with disabilities. There was a point made about the impact of any cuts on the Northern Ireland Publications resource, which receives a small amount of money, well, a relatively small amount of money, and for it, I'm sure it's a significant sum from the department. But the point made there, it's the organisation is an arm's length body of the department. It is receiving discretionary funding, and it would be difficult to justify preferential treatment for such a body. Our assessment also is that it should still enable it to carry out its a range of its main activities, even after the reduction. Moving now to the sports sector. And the key point here, I think, that was made is in relation to people with disabilities, and the detrimental impacts that the reductions are going to have are on those people. And the point that has been made there is that there is a specific target on participation for people with disabilities within the department's strategy for sport matters, and that there are a number of organisations contributing to the achievement of this target. There was specific points, maybe just if I look over the page to Disability Sport NI. They had made specific points about the programmes that they would put forward for people with disabilities, and that the cuts would have a severe impact on those programmes. However, this in terms of the baseline funding that had been allocated to Disability Sport NI, that had received a cut of 10%, which was actually less than most other bodies, well, marginally less than what had been allocated to other bodies. So there was some recognition of the special position there. I think the problem for disability sport, I guess, is that they also have had the benefit of in-year funding, and there's no guarantee, of course, that we'll be able to secure in-year funding in the future. And in fact, in the constrained budgetary climate, it's less likely than it might have been in the past. I think that is the real issue. However, Sport NI have been able to secure some additional funding through its national lottery money to help with programmes that disability sport are taking forward. We are very aware of Disability Sport NI's position, and the Minister has taken a personal interest in ensuring that there is a good level of awareness of its plans and support for those. The point was made, I think, also in relation to sport, that the grants were bearing the major part of the savings requirement. But we've made the point in the response document that in fact Sport NI themselves are reducing a significant amount of their administrative costs as part of the savings plan. If I move on then to museums, the only reference to the museum sector was in relation to Armagh Observatory and Planetarium, where there was a concern expressed that the free programmes currently delivered for special schools would be cut. I'm not sure what the decision there. I don't think any decision has been taken in relation to that, and certainly the department will be conveying those views on to the Armagh Observatory and Planetarium. Then in relation to languages, as during the one respondent raised the issue about the disparity in funding between the Irish and the Ulster Scots languages. I made the point that the Irish language was receiving higher levels of funding, and that the response, I think, reflects the fact that each area is being funded according to the stage it has reached in relation to its various programmes, the infrastructure that is being created, and so on. That there's no desire to discriminate in any way between levels of funding going to either sector. And a key point there, it is essentially based on need. Then the document finally looks at, just picks up again on the equality considerations. There's, in relation to, I think some of the respondents had raised concerns about the capital programme and what might happen in relation to, for example, physical access for people with disability and the work that was being done there to facilitate that. But those are really statutory responsibilities, and the department certainly will be looking to make sure that its ALBs comply with their statutory responsibilities. And we don't perceive that as a major risk in going forward. And then finally, the document, there were some points made in relation to an alleged failure to identify adverse impacts on people with disabilities. And we've tried to explain in the response, just to clarify, that the high-level impact assessments were on the spending proposals, not on the savings measures per se. And it was in that context that those assessments of what the impacts would be were made. And you know, we don't perceive there to be any significant negative impacts on that sector as a result of the expenditure programmes that will be taken forward next year. And finally, in Section 5, we have set out the allocation for 15-16 across the various bodies in the department. And those bodies are now being informed of what those allocations will be. And generally speaking, they bear out the indicative figures that they've already been basing their plans on. That's a brief run through the response to the various responses in the consultation, Chair.
Great, thanks very much. I think that summary document there that you appreciate is very useful. Damon, you want to add anything further? Or?
No, I'd here take any questions on the equality context of the consultation document.
Okay. Members wanting to? Yes, Leslie?
To just on the sort of beginning of the scene, as it were, you know, the actual budget figure and the 10% reduction. I noticed that there's a dramatic cut in the capital. Obviously, we know the main reason for that. But all that capital was conventional capital, was it not?
Well, it wasn't specified.
I think I saw a report saying there was no FTC sought.
FTC?
Financial transaction.
No, there's no FTC yet. It would all be conventional capital.
Why was that? Surely that's an opportunity.
There's no proposals which have presented themselves for which would attract funding under financial transactions capital. Certainly, we have sought to identify anything that could lend itself. We had discussions with DFP, but unfortunately, we haven't been able to identify anything that would allow us to put something forward.
Here's one of the problem with all departments. You know, they know and are used to conventional, but nobody waits, as you say, on them presenting themselves. And the reality is they don't. You've got to go and look for them. There's got to be some formation of private sector and government so on to actually headhunt the projects.
Yeah. Well, certainly we would be happy to consider anything, but our having looked at this, we just find it very hard to see where a viable scheme would come from, how it would be put together.
We have the University Ulster was an obvious one twice over, but there's been really nothing else. And that's, I believe, because people really haven't tackled this and developing the methodology, to achieve it to happen. But your capital's 8.1 million.
Yeah.
How much do you reckon you could profitably use?
Profitably use in terms of capital? Well, I think obviously a lot more than that. Like our existing statutory, our existing contractual commitments and statutory obligations, we estimate in this year will amount to around 15 million. Now that includes obviously the regional stadia programme, but then in addition to that, there's a number of other well-deserving projects. We've got things like the Belfast Central Library, for example. There's a business case currently being examined for that. So there's a significant additional element which we believe it would be, would benefit from additional funding.
The second point, David, what about any Barnett consequentials arising out of the current year? Surely you must expect a share of that.
Barnett consequentials in what areas?
Well, it doesn't really matter what area because they're unhypothecated when they come to here. But I can tell you that from England there's something like 79 million. Overspending in England, 79 million will come to us from health.
Yeah.
But we don't do that. We decide to allocate it where we like.
I guess it depends how DFP on how they wish to allocate such funding. I suppose in terms of additional money, the area that we've been looking to is in relation to the Stormont House Agreement and some of the funding that flows from that. And certainly there are things that we're doing where we will be bidding into that money, that central funding.
Yeah, but that's a bidding arrangement, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
The other thing is this money is coming across. It's actually probably held up in the centre about now. And as I say, there's a fair bit of money there. It's always amused me. Nobody seems to know anything about it until the DFP can choose to say the hand. Right?
I'm afraid it is in their gift, how that is utilised.
Okay. David, on the disability sport, and I think that it's obviously got a lot of publicity, and I think we're all very concerned about it. Just clarify the position. They're down 10% this year.
Yeah.
But they're also getting 96k.
Yes, there's additional money. Now that is coming from Heritage Lottery funding.
Right.
But I think in the past they have had some one-off money that Sport NI have been able to give them to fund particular things, and I believe it's that which is the real issue for the organisation. And certainly, what we can say is that we will bid for in-year money in 15-16, but there's no guarantee that we'll be able to meet those demands.
Yeah, and that's, I suppose that's the biggest risk to them.
Damien, do you want to say anything about the mitigating measures, potential mitigating measures?
Yeah, from a quality perspective, all we could impact assess, was the budget they get as a baseline budget, which is, I think, is £160,000 per year, and the cut was £16,000. Now, as David touched on there, they receive substantial funding in year, and I think that's the key issue, not the £16,000. Unfortunately, in terms of an equality impact assessment, we could only assess the impact of that £16,000, and we assessed it as a minor impact out of a pot of £160,000.
Yeah. The 96,000 still stands at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a separate stream of.
Obviously they're dependent on it. Right, the other thing was mentioned here was that the Minister had contacted other departments looking funding. Has there been any success on that you're aware of?
I'm not aware of what the position is there. We're not. I don't have that information, I'm afraid, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Basil, I understand you're next.
Thank you. Number of questions here. Since we were just dealing with equality, we'll work backwards. You said in your briefing that you thought that Irish and Ulster Scots funding, that there was not an inequality because it represented different stages of the language's development.
Yeah.
But you could argue that there is more to the funding than just the language, that there is a cultural issue.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, and I understand that the Ministerial Advisory Group in Ulster Scots is looking at some proposals in this area that might maybe replicate some of the initiatives that have been taken forward in the Irish language area.
But if I could just keep you away from the language side of things and just talk about cultural identity, because there's a lot of activities that we would support. We were hearing about one earlier on in the meeting that have got nothing to do with language and everything to do about celebrating history, a place and country and whatever. And I just wonder, does the department take any cognizance of that in terms of its funding strategy?
Well, it's not my area of expertise, but my understanding is that in the work that Magus is taking forward, there is some recognition of those aspects, and the heritage issues and so on, and cultural issues are being picked up within that, and that there will be proposals coming forward.
To which the department would be sympathetic?
I could, again, it's not my area of expertise. It will need to look at those in the certainly. I couldn't second guess what the likely outcome might be, depending on the robustness of the proposals and the.
So one of the things that you were able to express an opinion on was that you said that you were sympathetic to legacy funding for the North West in terms of in-year monitoring rounds. So you are able to express an opinion on that. I'd be interested to why you'd be sympathetic to that.
Well, I suppose there's a lot of good work has been done up in the North West with various groups, and I think the department would, that has generated. There's been good results coming from that funding, and I suppose the department would be keen to see that continue.
You could argue that the North West had a very successful UK City of Culture, quite significant amounts of funding from the year after in terms of legacy, and that it might now be time to share the benefit with places like Lisburn or Bangor or other bits that have not received any funding. I just wonder why you think that more funding for the North West is the appropriate. I don't know whether it is, I'm just interested, but why you think that that would be more beneficial than going to other places?
Well, I'm not saying it would be more beneficial than going to other places. These other places may have equally as good calls on funding as the North West. I suppose the only point that I would make is that there have been good results from the work that has been done in the North West, and it would, if that was to be jeopardised in the future because some programmes weren't able to run, for example, that would be regrettable.
Absolutely, but of course that's why we argue for funding, and you will guide monitoring round submissions. But if we're talking about where there's a feeling that there might be an inequity, did the department or the minister have any meetings with NI Screen between the publishment of the draft budget and the final?
There was engagement with Northern Ireland Screen at various levels. About the concerns that Northern Ireland Screen had in relation to the budget.
And were there similar interventions with libraries?
Yes.
And was there similar engagement with the Arts Council?
I think with all our arm's length bodies, yes.
See, it seems pretty strange to me, not that I'm against them getting additional sums, but it does seem pretty strange to me that libraries were protected. You could say, that was because there was a long-term commitment. The Minister has got a position on that. But NI Screen did get a whacking great 800,000, I think, uplift, when everybody else was not able to get such return. And I just, I'm looking at, when you usefully provided me an awful lot of detail about the cuts that were going to come through in the Arts Council and Sports NI, we're talking about relatively modest sums of money, 20,000 here, 20,000 there. And I just wonder, why was it not possible, or what steps were taken to engage with the Arts Council so that they too might make a proposition that says that we deal with a lot of young people and it's a growing sector?
I think the background to the Northern Ireland Screen issue, they were a special case in that they have received over the last number of years a substantial amount of in-year funding, which has allowed them to deliver the services that they do now. It was approaching £1 million a year. They were the only body that was in that position that was so dependent on in-year funding. I think the other thing that the Minister took into account was that in the consultation, in the responses to the first consultation, there was a very heavy theme in support of the work that Northern Ireland Screen do with this money. So the point was then that then allowed her to take that up with the Finance Minister, and she was successful in securing money for them.
Just to finish that point, there are a number of significant in-year monitoring awards that have been of real interest. £6 million to the legacy funding, I think we're told in a period for the North West. 6 million out of a budget of 100 million is quite significant. And so in-year monitoring seems to have been, let me tell you this, it will be under a lot of scrutiny on the way forward, because funding does seem to go to areas that have got little, how can I put it, it does give a problem if they're not into the baseline funding arrangements for going forward.
Yeah, no, I accept that, and it causes problems for those organisations who may wish to, depend on those funding streams when suddenly it disappears, and that really was, in essence, the Northern Ireland Screen issue.
I have just two more questions for you with the Chair's indulgence, if the Chair will indulge me, because there's not that many of us here. So
no, you're doing all right.
Thank you, Chair. The issue about inequality, and we've talked about disability. the department has targets for female participation in sport, and which I understand we are still struggling with. And it does seem to me a shame that we might be cutting back on those projects, given that we are under our targets. Is any consideration given to other Section 75 categories?
Damien, do you want to?
Again, it'll be specific to the policy areas, the lead on sport or the arts or libraries, museums. In terms of the budget, the cuts, what we assessed was not the programmes themselves, but the reduction in the programme, the cuts aspect of the policy. So
did you go to the next level? You see, the department very usefully gave me, or give everyone, the specific arm's length body reduction plans. This is why I can talk to you about £20,000 here or £5,000 there. And it's very good of the department to give it to me. I don't suppose they thought I would read it all, but I did. So I read it all in detail, and I looked to see where we are actually cutting staff and cutting programmes. And I think the devil is in the detail. And that's where we're seeing adverse effects coming against Section 75 groupings. In particular, in this particular one I'm talking about, female participation in sport.
Well, I agree. With any cuts, there's going to be implications. Now, as you say, there's within Sports Matters, in terms of disability, we've got a specific target for disability and a specific target for gender. But in the current scenario, with imposing cuts, there will be an impact. And in terms of, for instance, disability, although disability sport are receiving a cut, there are other strands and other programmes in operation that will vote.
But I asked you about female participation. I accept your answer in disability.
Yes, and likewise.
But, although I could argue it, but I'm talking particularly about a failure to promote satisfactorily female participation in sport, and I don't think we've protected that in our budget. But before the chair gets really annoyed with me, I'll ask you my last question. The question on this is departmental reductions overall. I think, David, what you said was that time did not permit you to do anything other than a pro rata cut.
That was certainly our starting position. Yeah. If we had, I think, more fundamental shifts in allocations would require us to plan properly for those and to forecast what the likely impacts would be, and to allow the bodies to prepare themselves in addition for that shift.
So the Arts Council, when they came before us, they took a view that they wouldn't adopt that position, that they would that in some cases they would fund all or fund nothing, but they wouldn't do a salami slicing approach. Yeah. And we've asked them to make those type of decisions. Yeah. I just wonder, is there any plans within the department, given that we are going to amalgamate or change or do whatever, for a fundamental review upon what the Department for Culture, Arts and Leisure should be doing? What it should be funding, in other words?
Well, we're always, I think that is always something that we would want to be considering, and it may be when we get into the new departments that a root and branch review will be undertaken.
Do you not think that you should be doing it now in advance of getting into the new departments? I mean, who's going to know decal better than decal at the moment? And there is a worry that whenever you amalgamate into bigger departments, whatever other benefits you might get, you may lose focus on the arts.
Yeah, it's a very pertinent point. We've got the comprehensive spending review, and we're not sure how long a period that is going to apply to, but that will be undertaken, we anticipate, in the summer, certainly the latter part of the summer, and that is an opportunity for us to address those very issues that you raised, to look in depth at what is being spent, what we need going forward.
Okay, Basil.
Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you. Cahill, next, please.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, gentlemen. Like I say, just I welcome any addressing of inequity in funding, be that in disability, sports issues, linguistic or geographical. and particularly to the northwest out there, because we know the record that has been in inequity there down through the years. Can I just say, in terms of EU funding, it's pretty scant, just the comment upon it there. Where and how much funding has been sought within that sources? Because I believe that's really very much an untapped source.
I think that's a view that's shared by a number of people within the system. We have a target, an overall target, which is set to increase the level of funding by 50%. And I think at the moment it is relatively small for the department. I know that the Arts Council has undertaken, they have a resource in this area, which is focused on getting additional money and for helping their clients access EU funding. But other than that, there isn't a huge amount being done. But I think we're keen to get an understanding of what is possible. There's additional resources being put in at the centre to try and identify those potential opportunities for getting EU funding. And it is something we have created. There's a group that's been set up, a task and finish group among the ALBs to look at income generation, and certainly EU funding is a key stream of that.
Yeah, but in other committees, I know that exact figures have been sort of named as what's been targeted. Do you have a ballpark figure there that could be potentially accessed?
Well, I don't have to my I would need to provide you with the figure that the department currently gets. All I can say is it is relatively small. I think the Arts Council would be the area where there's most being done. And I suppose it's fair to say the department, in quantifying what the potential might be, is just unsure as to how much more at this stage could be secured from Europe.
Well, there is a specific focus group within the department now looking actively at Europe.
And there will be a key individual who will be put in place to coordinate all the EU activity.
And when do you think we can get some sort of report on that?
I would need to report back to you on that, but I'll come back with a more definitive statement of where we are and what our plans are.
Yeah. I think it's not the only show in town, but it certainly will be a major one in the come.
Yeah.
There needs a piece of work done on it. Yeah. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Cathal. I think that concludes everyone, and thanks very much. Yeah, that's everyone. David and Damien, thank you very much for coming along to the presentation.
Thank you.
It's very informative, and I think that summary document was particularly useful.
Thanks
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, members, then we suggest that we move into a closed session. We all agree that we do that. Right, thank you.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30.